Well, good morning from Lewis in the UK, south coast of England. We're a little late. We're pulling a Jack DeManio this morning. Who's Jack DeManio, you may say? Well, older listeners will know, and I'll tell you who in a few minutes' time. And also, I'm going to tell you who Jack Jackson was, because Jack is going to take us off to China. And my lovely friend Star Jackson is going to take us off with her sister Eva to Armenia. And if we have time after that, we'll go to the moon. Right, there's good old Buddy from Bensound. Lovely people at Bensound who let us use their music. Wonderful people. And here we are, Rouser Radio in Lewis, East Sussex in the United Kingdom. And united it is at the moment, but by golly, I'll tell you, the regions are fighting it out with some particularly volatile politicians in Scotland. They've always been volatile in Northern Ireland. We never hear a peep out of the Welsh. What nice people they are. Anyway, here we are, and we won't get into divisions this morning. No divisions at all. I said that I would tell you who Jack DeManio was. Jack DeManio was the star DJ in the 1960s, 1970s on BBC. They didn't call them DJs back then. We had them as presenters. It was very proper. But DeManio was notorious for making huge bloopers. He could never get the date right. He could never get the time right. He was never on time getting on the air. And that's why I say we're pulling a DeManio this morning, because we were late. It's now in Lewis 6:43. And we've only been going for 3 minutes, which means that we didn't actually get on the air until 6:40, 10 minutes late. But I'll tell you why in a minute, because I thought that it was worthwhile making sure that I'd got something that was really nostalgic, way back to the 1940s. And I think you'll love it, because a gentleman called Jack Jackson, in the dark days of the war, used to play this each Sunday on his what was, to all intents and purposes, Top of the Pops. It wasn't Top of the Pops at all, of course, but it was popular music from the week. And each week, he would play week in, week out, until we all started to love it, as I was only a tiny little boy, but the adults loved it as well. It's called Rose, Rose, I Love You, in English, and it was later done by Frankie Lane, and that's another story. Some morning I'll tell you about Frankie Lane and me. But for the moment, I thought that we should take a listen before we go to Armenia and my two lovely sisters who are out there performing wonders, real true professionals, creative beyond belief, and like most of my friends, completely and utterly mad. But I love them. I just love them. I love mad people. And actually, most of the artists that I know, the clever people, much cleverer than I, are mad. I'm still mixed up with one too, because Annie Verrill, who is going to join me eventually on this program as my co-host, she's completely and utterly mad too. So I go through life mixing with mad people and really thoroughly enjoying it, because who wants to know the ordinary folk? No, that's not fair. Of course we do. we love you dearly. But it is nice to be dealing with people who are culturally active, who are culturally creative, because they keep things moving on and on and on. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hopefully play Rose, Rose, I Love You. And if it will play. And this was by Jack Jackson, way back in the dark days of the war. On a Sunday morning, he would keep everybody on their toes with his top 10. Now, can you really deny how just lovely that is, and how much it meant to the British public to hear this lady, this from China, come on each Sunday morning, Jack Jackson, and sing that? It was absolutely wonderful, and of course it stuck in my memory along the way. And over the years, I've had various radio shows in various places, and I've always managed to find it, and I've always managed to play it, and now I managed to play it today here. And the reason I was late on was I found it, but downloading sometimes is quite difficult, and I had to go around the bushes again, and the time ticked by. So that's why, unfortunately, I was just a bit late on the air this morning. I did a Jack Damanio, but I will actually get the background to that lady, because it's quite fascinating, and she's just lovely. If you see a photograph of her, she's just quite beautiful, and just that voice, it's so piercing and high, but just so engaging. And then I was talking to Annie yesterday, my co-host, and he was saying how much, because she's quite a young thing, you know. I mean, she's only in her mid-30s, and as opposed to me, who is I've only just reached 80. Well, 80 and a half. That's why I'm so mad. But she was saying how she was looking forward to being involved with television and radio, which she now is very heavily, and she's a natural. She's very good. She's a very good broadcaster. But she also wants to travel. She hasn't done a lot of travel. She's got 2 children, and a mother to look after. So she's been very much a homebody, but she's looking forward to travelling. And I said, well, you know, I've travelled a lot. And she said, well, yes, but I really want to go on holiday. I don't want to go travel working. And I said, well, I'm quite the opposite. I think I can only name a handful of times that I've actually gone on holiday. The rest of the time, when I've travelled, I've been working. And that's true of... I have several odd places where I like to go, you see, because I'm a work traveller, as it were. I love going to Kosovo. I love going to parts of the Balkans. I love going to Armenia. And as I said yesterday, somebody said to me when I was in Armenia last year, I don't know why tourists come here, all we've got is churches. But Armenia was in the front line because it was a Christian country, or always has been a Christian country from about 600 AD, when it embraced... It was the first country ever to embrace Christianity as a state religion. And so when the Asian hordes came around, and decided that this was a nice bit of real estate that they would like, Armenia, the churches were built into rock and were defensive positions. And some of them are just fascinating, and a lot of them are built on hills and promontories overlooking the countryside, because then they could see the enemy coming and they could prepare for it. It's absolutely fascinating. And those of you who didn't listen yesterday, how many billions? I told you quickly the story about the Ararat brandy factory, which is absolutely superb. I mean, just a little visit down there, even for a tot of brandy, is great. But it's very an interesting place. But that was where Ararat was Churchill's favourite brandy, and when it went downhill, he called Stalin and said, "What's going on?" And Stalin called the factory and said, "What's going on?" And apparently the chief chemist had been sent to a gulag for some reason or other, and he was immediately brought back on Stalin's orders. He got the brandy back in shape, and Churchill picked up the phone and said, "Joseph, my dear friend, thank you so much for doing that." And they went back to smoking a cigar and drinking his Ararat brandy, put to rights. Anyway, Armenia is just a wonderful, wonderful place, and Yerevan is quite small as a city, but it's a lovely city. There is a restaurant there which serves traditional Armenian food. It's in a sort of a little basement place, and there's a lovely, lovely ethnic, if that's the right word, native singer with a little orchestra, and it is a delightful experience. There's so many things to do in Yerevan. You can sit in the middle of the main park, which is really sort of a walkway, and there are little cafes and places that you can sit out and drink in the evening warmth, because it is quite a warm country. And there's a time that when I went into the interior, we stopped at what I would call a transport cafe, except that it was run by an old lady of indeterminate age, and it was in a tent. And she gave us a marvellous, marvellous breakfast of fruit and honey and bread and coffee. And she made sure that there were only 2 seats in the place, but she made sure that they were cleaned and that we sat down, and we had a wonderful time. And when I said to my colleague, my Armenian colleague, how much did that breakfast cost? And she said she would not take anything. She was so honoured to have us there. And that brings tears to your eyes when there are still people in our lifetime, in our community, who behave like that, who are genuine and generous. And, you know, the other funny thing is it's a big sheep country. And when you go up into the interior, you go along a narrow road, and suddenly you're held up by a herd of sheep being shepherded along, not by a shepherd, but by a cowboy, except he's a sheep boy. But he's dressed like a cowboy, he's astride a horse, he's got the chaps, he's got absolutely everything.